Hello there, hello there, hello there. Welcome to another This Week in WordPress. I am joined this week by a right bunch of WordPress experts. It's very nice to have everyone along. You may, of course, notice on the screen we are missing, it's almost like my left or right leg. Paul Lacey has sadly had to drop out of this week's episode, which is a bit of a shame. But as you can see, we're surrounded by some veritable experts. And we're going to talk about the WordPress news for the last week. I'm going to go around in the order in which I've got them in my show notes. I'm going to introduce you not in the order that you're on the screen, but in the order that I've got them written down. But first of all, we're joined by Christina Hawkins. How are you doing, Christina?
Hello.
Now, Christina Hawkins is a digital marketing agent. She is the founder of Global Specs, which is a digital marketing agency serving home service markets. Christina's been working in this industry for 20 years. Her first website was for a small Arizona metro agency in 1999. And you still manage it.
Yes. Yeah.
Ha.
Still manage it 20 years later. Yeah.
I'm hoping it doesn't look the same now.
It's time for a redesign.
Yeah, that's quite a bit out of date. And we're also joined by Ian. Now, Ian, I don't want to butcher your name, but we've not really met before, so I'm going to say Ian Poulsen. Please forgive me if I've got that wrong.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's good.
Oh, great. Okay. So Ian is the project manager at the WordPress product company Delicious Brains, who you may have heard of, or notable plugins like WP Migrate DB Pro and Spin Up WP. And he runs his own WordPress plugins like WP User Manager and more recently Plugin Rank, a SaaS app to help WordPress plugin developers rank higher on WP.org searches. He runs the WP content community, WordPress news site, co-hosts the Pressing Matters podcast, and has recently started a newsletter called WP Trends, which I've just signed up for, providing WordPress marketing insights, trends, and acquisition opportunities. You are very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for the long intro.
Yeah, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. And finally, over there, confidently, I point in the right direction. We have Ronald. Now, sadly, Ronald joined us at the very last minute. So I'm just going to say that Ronald works for Yith and is dead good.
I don't want to add any more. But yeah, I'm the partnership manager at Yith, and that's we do a whole lot of WooCommerce plugins for.
Oh, that's Yith, of course. I'm sure everybody has heard of Yith. We're very famous in the WordPress WooCommerce space. If you're joining us, please feel free to add some comments. If you go over to wpbuilds.com/live, then you'll be able to comment, but you'll have to be logged into Google. You should be able to watch it over there. And if you're in our Facebook group, you can find that wpbuilds.com/Facebook. Find the thread, and you'll be able to comment. It's an either or kind of thing. You can't really do both. But if you make a comment, we'll try to put it up on the screen if it's on message. So just quickly going to go through all of the bits and pieces that we normally do at the start of the show, not about Elementor. We're going to start here. This is our wpbuilds.com website where we produce all of our content. We produce this, which is This Week in WordPress, recorded on a Monday, scheduled to come out on a Tuesday morning. You can keep in touch with all that we do over on our subscribe page, wpbuilds.com/subscribe. And if you want to catch episodes of this show from the past, you can see my ugly face and Paul Lacey's delightful face many, many times on the icons at wpbuilds.com/news-archive. Okay, enough self-promotional nonsense. Let's get on with the actual show. We've got a variety of things to talk about. Normally, it's a bit of me and Paul talking things through, but because Paul's not with us today, I think I will introduce most of the items and then hand it over to you guys, if that's all right, to have a little bit of a discussion about. The first one comes from actually last week's panelist. We had Anne on. Anne McCarthy was on from Automatic, and she was talking about the fact that she was trying to get as much feedback about the full site editing program as she possibly could. And I'm featuring this, as always. The links will be in the show notes when we publish them. But this is some sort of high-level feedback, all about the bits and pieces that are going on. It was all really, the question here was about giving feedback about the UI and about whether things worked in the way that you were expecting. And some of the initial feedback was things like people weren't entirely sure that they were clicking on the right UI element. So an example for that would be this saving process. She says, while the saving experience was reliable, technically and generally intuitive, it has left a lot to be desired and resulted in a fair bit of confusion around expected behavior. In other words, quite a few people who submitted feedback kind of were struggling to decide whether or not they were clicking on the right things to save things. There was problems with the alignment and the width as well. Actually, I really had problems this week with the Gutenberg editor, but that's nothing to do with this. It decided to sort of go full left for me instead of floating in the middle. But have any of you played with full site editing? Do you embark upon these sort of like things that people like Anne McCarthy put out, user testing and so on, or do you just hope that other people will do that for you? Anybody chime in?
I'm guilty to that, to let other people solve all the initial bugs first. And also, I have to say, I wish I had a bit more time to play around. That would have been really nice as well. But I looking at the article, I think the key thing that stands out for me, and that's based on also your feedback, is that the user experience is different. Again, there's some confusing things, when and where to press. And when you look at WordPress, and also for me, WooCommerce is really important. And WooCommerce is moving sort of to a slightly different layout with their menus. And then you have Gutenberg. It almost seems like you need all these different skill sets in order to create something. And I know it's the same with themes. And if you're still using part theme, part full site editor, wow, that's a lot of stuff to learn before you can actually produce something. So I hope they get it right and really focus on that initial user interface research of what they're doing here to make it work for everyone.
What about you, Christina or Ian? Do you play with this sort of stuff knowing that this is coming down the pipe? Do you worry about it now and get in there so that your clients, if clients are a worry for you, so that you've got
Yeah, I do get in there as much as I can. I don't use yet for full site editing. It's really like I'm sticking with the blog posts. So that's typically where I use the Gutenberg blocks, is just because my feeling is posts should not be designed. And so but I struggle because my clients get really confused about the updating. I've had issues of permalinks. I've had issues where people don't know where things can go. It's a little confusing. But now that I'm seeing this, is probably something I need to start collecting these, because they're not going to do it. So I probably need to take some time myself and kind of note some issues that my clients come to me about. And I have to do little videos to show them how to do something. And it takes me a minute. Like I have to look at it myself. Like, I have no idea. Let me find out what's wrong.
Yeah.
I'll get back with you.
Yeah.
Especially when we're in the middle of a WordPress meetup, because I run the Houston WordPress meetups and we just get a lot of users in there. And we get, it's probably something I need to just start collecting their FAQs and the issues that they have and submit them in here. So,
yeah. What about you, Ian? Do you get involved in any of this kind of stuff, or do you sort of take a backseat approach?
Yeah, definitely more of a backseat approach, especially since Gutenberg's come out. I think when Gutenberg and the block editor was, having its the big thing around WordPress 5.0, I was more involved in trying it and seeing where it was going. But I don't know, it's not something that I do that sort of comes across in my day-to-day, because it's not client-side building. It's, the products that we work on at Delicious Brains and my own plugins are not necessarily affected by this stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's not in the forefront of my mind. But also, I don't know, like the way that the Gutenberg, the release and the feedback that was given, but then not taken on board, and there was a lot of uproar, I think, around the block editor. It's just left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth, where I don't feel like I want to get involved in it again and look at it. And it's not something that I don't know, I'm not going to be rushing to use full site editing. I still use the classic editor on a lot of my sites. And it'll be interesting to see it play out from a wider perspective, but it's not something I don't have the time as well. It's just another issue.
Yeah, it's curious, because I was just looking at the list of plugins that you at Delicious Brains are responsible for, and you are quite immune to the block editor in a way, aren't you? Migrate databases, spinning up servers, and then WP User Manager. You're in a good space to ignore the block editor, which is quite nice if it's troubling you. Yeah,
I think the biggest crossover is one of our plugins, Offload Media.
Yep.
Which,
yeah.
There's always a little bit going on with how media is offloaded via the block editor, and that's definitely the potential for more issues. But yeah, no, it's a weird situation. It's nice because obviously a lot of companies have had to really get stuck into block development and custom stuff, and potentially pivoted to be building blocks or things that are specific for the block editor. So it has been nice to be slightly removed from that.
Yeah, I can't quite yet imagine giving a WordPress website with just the block editor in it and saying, off you go, design a website. We don't seem to be at that point. It was interesting. Last week we had, like I said, Anne McCarthy from Automatic, and she's been instrumental. Obviously, she wrote the piece that we've just looked at about the full site editing and the feedback that they've got. And she was talking about the numbers of people that traditionally sort of show up and assist with that process. And forgive me if I get this wrong, Anne, but I think she said it, something like 30. If they get 30 pieces of feedback, that would be considered like that's okay. And of course, 30 compared to the 40% of the web that we've got going on, it's a drop in the ocean, isn't it? And the more people, I guess, like Ronald, like Ian, like me, like Christina, who can drop in their feedback. But it's very much a question of, when have you ever got time to do this? We've
also
faced that.
They need to communicate that, isn't it, with the users? I mean, I didn't come across that. And
I never saw that.
And going back to the WooCommerce ecosystem, it was also because you run meetup, and I joined Bob in one of the meetups. So we're sort of now experimenting and working on bringing the WooCommerce sort of development side and WooCommerce as a automatic business to the user and to the plugin developers, and sort of bridging that gap a little bit. And now looking sort of in from a little bit from the outside, I can see that Gutenberg might have the same issue, but even Gutenberg is not so clearly defined as WooCommerce, because you either do WooCommerce or you don't. You do general WordPress, but Gutenberg sort of affects everybody and no one. So they must have a really hard job trying to get feedback and people involved and feel they own it.
One of the things that I think they're really, it's going to be such a difficult circle to square, is that we're so used to things like, well, we'll get onto Elementor, but things like Beaver Builder and all of these products where they could design it completely in a silo. They just went off and built it, and when it was built, they just shipped it and said, there it is, and it was ready. They didn't have to worry about the backward compatibility. They didn't have to worry about the 40% of the internet using it and the fact that it has to work back to WordPress 3.6. They've got to support all of that legacy, and you do think that task must just be so difficult when you're trying to build with volunteer help in many cases, or help that's been seconded by companies. It's not like 5 days a week, 365 days a year. It's maybe a day here and a day there. And they're trying to build with all the legacy of WordPress. They've got to make it accessible. They've got to do all of these other things. And they've got to do it with the community constantly in the background, because people like me, we have an opinion when it doesn't behave as we expect.
But you're polite, Nathan. I think there are people that might not be so uber polite in their response. And I think what Ian said when it came to WordPress 5, I think there was quite a lot of comment. Yeah,
it was interesting. I chatted to Josepha last week, who, I don't know if you know Josepha Hayden Chomposi. She's the executive director of WordPress. I was lucky enough to have a chat with her, and that, Ian, that period of 5.0 really did make her go back and re-examine. She said she spent 6 months just trying to reach out to as many people as possible and see if they can not make the same mistakes again. But whether or not you believe this is a repetition of history, only you can tell. But should we move on to the next piece? Because the next piece is basically more bashing of WordPress. Sadly, we're going to bash WordPress for a bit, and then we're going to stick up for WordPress after a little while.
But I think we're going to bash him again after that, right?
Oh, really? Are we? We're not. I have to say, some weeks it's just like that, right? It just comes out that way, but it's not intended. We love you, WordPress. This is a piece on WP Tavern. It's Justin Tadlock writing a piece called Gutenberg 10.2 adds spaces to navigation lists, lets users categorize template parts, and introduces scoped patterns. The taste in my mouth, the the one thing that I was left was this paragraph, which I thought was quite interesting, in which Justin says, in one of the worst ideas in Gutenberg, in the Gutenberg project it has brought us, users can now insert spacer blocks between horizontal navigation block items. And Justin is very calm. It's very rare that you see Justin sort of adopt such an inflammatory language, but he's a bit ticked off with this here, the idea that you can get what is essentially an unordered list, and you can insert divs into the unordered list. And he says, no, this is not semantic. This should not be allowed. And I think he's probably right. I haven't gone back and looked at what's allowed these days and what's not allowed. But he thinks that's a silly idea. But there is better stuff. There's more things that he thinks are actually quite nice. Like, for example, the fact that you can create 2-column layouts automatically, although you can't send it back to a 1-column layout. He mentions that at the top, so that's quite nice. He also mentions that you've now got these template part categories. So if you're creating little template parts that you want to reuse later on, rather than having the default things like header and footer, you can now create your own little category sections and things like that. So whilst there's not a lot going on, there was quite a few nice little incremental releases, and also query block patterns. And I'll quote, "The query block is at the heart of full site editing. It will eventually be one of the main primary components to both developers and as users as they interact and build their sites. The development team introduced a new concept for end users when inserting the query block. In the past, users saw several block variations. Now they choose between patterns that are more specific to the block. Out of the box, there are large, medium, and small patterns, and users can also opt for a blank slate." So just the idea that you can insert these query block sections and you can make them look a little bit more how you'd like them. This is exactly what I'm hoping comes very soon. You know, the query block is going to be the mainstay of just about everything that I would imagine I'll end up building. So little incremental improvements is very welcome. Again, over to you guys if you want to natter that one through.
I've just thought of something. It's more an observation, but you have all these new terminologies like block pattern query and full site editing, and I know we probably come to it later with Elementor as well. And there was this, I think it was last week, about the use of full site editing, and all these new terminologies. It all changes, and you need to be really quick. Imagine if you didn't experience this Gutenberg era, and you sort of you left WordPress and you jump right into it. This is all really confusing, because weren't we supposed to call it widgets and other and shortcodes and so on, and now suddenly we have to learn all this new stuff, and who owns it, and what's the right terminology? Wow, it's
and there's so many little acronyms starting to be thrown around as well. Like notice in that piece, they don't actually say full site editing; they just call it FSE. It's just lots and lots of new little things, and it's all coming along at such breakneck speed as well. And I feel that somebody like me, who takes the pain to try to digest it, I don't claim to actually understand all of it, but I can keep up with it. But I imagine that if I was an end user of a site, I'm guessing what 90% of WordPress's user base is just people who want a site for creating blog posts and putting out their marketing materials. All of this stuff must be very jarring, and although they're insulated from it in that they're not reading these beta posts and things like that, it must be quite jarring. Anyway, over to Christina or Ian if they want to interrupt.
No, from my end, I mean, I work with end users every day, all day long. So I'm not a developer. I used to be, but I've handed it off to my developers on my team. And so even me, I'm reading this stuff like I have no idea what they're talking about, honestly. And I'm in there every day. I'm in WordPress every single day with 20, 30 websites, and I'm struggling to follow this. I hop on and it's moved, things have moved around, the names, we're changing names. I can't imagine from a user's endpoint what they're seeing every time they log in. And Ronald makes a really good point about this. And you too, Nathan, about things happening very quickly. So I wish that they would slow down a little bit, get the things that we're all a little struggling with, get that right, then move on to the next cool thing to adjust, and let end users get used to this. But I have to agree with him about spacers, and I'm a bit of a purist. I have a hard time when I look at code. I'm like, what the hell? You're not supposed to do this, even though it makes it on the front end, it looks fine. But on the back end, I just think it bloats things up, makes things a little difficult for other developers to come in going, why did you add a div to this? This doesn't make any sense. And so, especially if you're theme developers, people like that, I can't imagine what that's going to do for them if you add the wrong place, you know? So yeah, I think it's difficult to really kind of keep up with all this stuff. So yeah.
David Bloom in the comments. Thank you, David, for making the time to come and join us today. Said the blockification of code is the quickest path to visual inconsistency and a world of ugly sites, he says. WordPress is adding every spice in the rack to the dinner and it's going to taste terrible. Oh,
remember the days we tables. I feel like we're going backwards. You know, the days we had tables and we would put spacer GIFs in there to give us little spaces on the left and the top. Remember those days?
Yes.
You know,
I remember once being given a job by a client of trying to mimic the contents of a desk.
Yeah.
You know, so got the screen over there and the keyboard and just trying to line that up with tables.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then we put spaces, the little code for space.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I was like, that's what we're doing here. So it's definitely a step backward. I don't know. Is this something that I'm wondering why they added that? Why did somebody go, hey, let's add this in there? Is it a Wix thing? Does Squarespace allow this to add spacers and stuff? I
honestly don't know. And Justin sort of makes the part. He says the space. I'll prop it back on the screen. He says the spacer block. Just in this paragraph here, the spacer block has never been right since it was introduced into Gutenberg. I always assumed it was an unfortunate stopgap solution for vertical spacing until we got a proper margin and padding options. I never imagined we could find new and inventive ways for it to define a site's markup. And I do like this. You can imagine this is heavily laden with sarcasm, I'm guessing. Fortunately, there are solutions for this sort of horizontal spacing that have been available to web designers for decades. Margin and padding. So there you go. Ian, anything to add?
Well, I was just going to say about the spacing. Presumably, if you're building an unordered list or a navigational list in something like Elementor, you would have control over margins and paddings on the list items. So why not do this a similar type of thing? Give advanced control if that's what we want people to do within the editor. It just seems silly to have that spacer. Yeah.
The only scenario that I can imagine is, are we talking about, let's say, for example, you've got a menu on the left, floated left, and a menu floated right, and perhaps you want to put a logo in the middle or something, and you want to just sort of pad. I don't know. I'm struggling to see how this one got in, but anyway, there we are. We are our second bashing has taken place. Shall we introduce our third bash of the day? We apologize in advance, but these things have to happen. This is actually from a good friend of mine. I would say Lee is one of the people who has been very active in the WordPress space. He's a UK developer. He's got a fantastic podcast over at Agency Trailblazer. And perhaps this sort of illustrates some of the things that we've been talking about. In fact, it does, because many of the things that you've all said come out of this article, because Lee has decided, whilst not moving away from WordPress entirely, because he feels that there are many scenarios where WordPress is still going to be important to him, Lee has a non-WordPress side to his business called Event Engine, and they sell their, I'm going to call it a CMS for events. And people who've got live events and digital events use that, and I think he's been using WordPress for the longest time with that. But this article is him going through all of the pain points, all of the reasons why it's no longer working out, and it kind of breaks down into these subheadings that you can see. So the pace of development, he feels that it's kind of been going a little bit too slow. The innovations that third-party solutions have been able to come up with. And then you've got the advent of things like, what's the one that everybody's talking about at the minute? The Webflow. That's the one that I keep hearing about. Innovations like that seem to be going at a rapid pace. He's concerned about the database structure and the way that the database is queried for the kind of things that he's been building it for. He's worried about the plugin ecosystem and the fact that there's a lot of people out there who are now kind of creating plugins that he's become to rely on, that it can be catastrophic for his business if those plugins aren't maintained and updated. And I think this is kind of the biggest one that worries him, because he's in the agency space, in that he wants to be somebody that agency owners look up to as somebody that can give advice. And he feels that there's this implementer community of people who have, how should we say it, no history with building websites, who can use a UI such as Elementor and can set up an agency, and that kind of makes it a cheaper offering, and it makes it more difficult to find the right clients, which is what this targeting user base is on about. He also is critical of the WordPress leadership structure and how all of that's done. He's got a little bit of criticism for the fact that we've obviously got a for-profit entity, WordPress.com and Automatic, who are making the decisions. He's not entirely sure if the decisions are going in the right direction. So, as Lee says, what do you think?
I'm just skimming through the notes, of the podcast, and some of the points he's making about the issues with the database structure and how things are stored. I think it really does depend on what you're building, what type of site. Like if you're building apps and sites that aren't just the typical kind of brochure site, or things that are going above and beyond, then perhaps WordPress isn't the right tool. And I think it sounds like he's coming to that conclusion and therefore moving off it to something else. And that's probably the right call, because if you're building something and you've used WordPress as the kind of quick and dirty, let's get this working on a system that we know, and it has all of this other infrastructure for free, like the users and authentication, then WordPress is great to start out. But if you outgrow it, and WordPress is, the database structure, the way it works from post meta and all of the issues around performance and stuff, then if you've outgrown it, you've outgrown it, and that's not a fault of the system as such. But I do get what he's saying with some other things.
Do you over at Delicious Brains? I mean, maybe you've got a sort of like parent company or something. I don't know. Are you all about WordPress? Is everything that you do in your daily life to do with WordPress, or do you sort of foray into other things and not use WordPress for certain specific tasks that your business requires?
Yeah, I mean, it's very WordPress flavored, definitely, and we're building WordPress plugins. But in terms of the company, because we're building SpinUp WP, which is
of course
a hosting control panel, we've got, that's not, the infrastructure around that is not WordPress. We run all of our marketing sites on WordPress, but we've got the app itself is Laravel. We've got Laravel developers. We've got people who are, familiar with sysadmin stuff because it's doing a lot of server work. So yeah, it's an interesting point though, because there's definitely maybe like a 70-30 split in the company that is still WordPress focused. And then the other people are very much they're building with Laravel. They're outside quite happily of the WordPress development world. And they're, I don't know, they have their own challenges for sure, but they don't have the WordPress challenges. But yeah, overall the company is WordPress focused.
And because you've got such a back history of building WordPress products, have you discovered, in the same way that we're always being told that the curve just keeps going up for WordPress? When I joined WordPress in the community, I think we were on like 24% or something like that, and now we're on, slowly the numbers went into the 30s and then the mid 30s, and now we're into something beginning with a 4, 40 something, wherever we're at now. Does that reflect how your business has grown? Do you see that WordPress has a bright future? Because at some point that curve it can't just keep going up. At some point it's got to tail off, but I don't know if we're at that point now.
Yeah, I think for the company, it's certainly tracked the success in terms of, we're still around, we're still hiring, we're still growing, we're still pumping out products and improving the existing features. But I think there's also, you don't have that same sort of hockey stick as the company, because as the marketplace has grown and as WordPress has grown, there's more competitors. Like there was not many migration plugins back in the day when WP Migrate DB first released in, I don't know, 2014, early 2014. Whereas there's now, hundreds of those types of plugins on .org alone. So yeah, you do see the success, but it's not runaway because there's so many other people in the ecosystem doing the same thing. And the pie's big, but there's lots of people having slices.
Yeah, good point. Ronald, Christina?
Go ahead, Ronald.
Well, I think Ian made some very good points as well about the big pie. It's very true. It's the pie is big, but everybody wants to slice, and you can do that by undercutting, or you can do that by making something better. And I think what Lee also, with regard to the plugin market, you have a lot of maybe developers that sort of undercut and cut corners, and therefore put out worse quality, and that overall the experience of WordPress could be greatly affected. And if you're working with clients, who might just install any random plugin because it's free and they don't really know quite sure what they're doing, well, you can just imagine, and I think everybody has experienced it anyway, the chaos it can cause to your install or to your WordPress. On the other hand, WordPress is great, and I like to see it grow, but I don't want it to be the tool for everything, because I think it's also sometimes nice to know what its limitations are. I wouldn't want WordPress to power 100% of the web, because I don't think that's what WordPress is designed to do for. And it's like with everything, it has a sort of pros and cons. But I think if you know where you are, what you're comfortable with, your market, use it. And I think maybe speak too soon. One of my quotes was, "I use WordPress as a tool in a toolbox." And if you know what it can be used for, then great, use it. Don't there are certain things you can't use it for.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for me on the flip side, when it comes to like agency building, so I'm also the coach for WP Elevation, and we're seeing this huge growth coming in from folks that are just getting into becoming WordPress freelancers or running an agency. And there is a lot of talk using other tools other than WordPress. So even WP Elevation is starting to, hey, we're not just WordPress freelancers. It's a
right.
marketing. Because it's a broad spectrum of people, and we just don't want to be tied to a specific platform, especially when there's so many different tools that are out there. But I can see Lee's point. I listened to his podcast. I didn't think we were going to talk about it this morning. I was just like, oh, this is good. But his points about just anybody coming in and on YouTube and saying, these little gurus, hey, you too can run, make $10,000 websites, and it's just not true. That's a very false narrative that it's easy just to build a charge somebody $10,000. And it can, if you're not careful, cheapen the industry. And I think what Ronald was saying too about, it just depends the direction. You can say to do $500 websites. That's fine, but are you profitable at it? That's the question. And then on the flip side is I wouldn't compete with that. That's not what I would ever compete with. And I know why, because the processes that I build into it, it's not just the website that I build, the processes, the performance, all of that stuff is what ends up what I'm trying to deliver as an agency owner. And so I do see that, and it's just something that we kind of watch. We also see that it's not just WordPress. People come in and say, hey, run an agency, have a PPC, do SEO, build websites.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be super careful of too. And they just want to white label everything without any inclination of how any of this works. And it just applies to WordPress in the sense that they have no idea on the back end, the development side of WordPress. So I think like you were guys saying earlier, they just pick a template. They go to, a theme shop, pick a template, looks good, stick it on there without really understanding the user, about the market, about the who the target market is for the company. And so I do see his point on that. When it comes to the development side, I do worry about that, because just like we were talking about with Gutenberg blocks, I do fear that we're trying to compete with the wrong people, like Wix. We're trying to be another Wix. Yeah, that's not WordPress is supposed to be, and I don't think we should be competing with Wix or Squarespace. I've often had people come to me and I'm like, this isn't the right tool for you right now. You're literally just starting. Just go to Squarespace, put something together. They've got some nice tools, highly recommend it. And when you're ready, come back. We'll build you something pretty amazing. But right now, you just need a nice tool. I don't want WordPress to be that though. WordPress.com maybe. But and that's the other thing is educating users between the difference. And I do wish there was a little bit more education on that side when WordPress.com is marketing themselves versus Automatic and what they're trying to promote.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how the next couple of years brings, because if they do manage to pull it out of the bag and they do have this amazing editor that can do headers and footers and what have you, it'd be interesting to see how the market shifts. Will we see people coming with zero expertise and cutting out agencies just saying, I'll do it myself? I'll take the Squarespace idea and I'll just run that through WordPress? Or will it be that, it'll still be fraught with difficulty, enough difficulty that we've still got a job?
Yes. Yeah. Well, even not so much the difficulty is from a developer standpoint, but difficulty from a point of building a website properly. Instances where people throw in a photo and they think it's perfect, and it turns out there's a big porta-john behind them. Like, that's really, that's just us. It's just how we know how to build sites, what to do, what not to do. And so that's something that you just don't pick up. That's not something you're like, I'm going to start an agency right now. And no, you have to understand there's nuance to all this too.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, we're on to the last. I promise, no, probably not. But anyway, we're on to almost the last bit of bashing. Cameron is in. Well, he was in the chat earlier, and we thought we'd throw this one in just because it kind of felt like it chimed a little bit with what Lee was saying. This is a talk that Cameron did over at WordFest Live back in, I want to say January. Yes, January the 22nd. It says on the caption there. It's basically just sort of Cameron's take. He's very often in here. He's been very good to us, making comments on many posts that we put out and what have you. So I just wanted to highlight his grievances. Probably the best way, because we've dwelt on bashing WordPress a lot already, is if you just want to have like a high level approach, this is it here. Just go through the transcript here, and probably an awful lot of the things that you've bashed your head against with WordPress, Cameron's been there before you. He's a plugin developer, and he's fed up, shall we say. So more bashing. But that's it. We're going to stop because this is so coincidental. Now, occasionally we have some good synchronicity on the show, and this is one of those pieces, because we're joined, as you can see, by, you look fairly similar. You've got glasses. There's a slight difference. And also, look at this. There's Topher in the comments. Topher runs HeroPress, and we've got Ronald on, who's put a piece on HeroPress all about your sort of struggle and journey over the last few years, 9 years, I think it is. HeroPress, if you don't know, is a site which I would really recommend anybody subscribes to, because it's just relentlessly great. They just feature the nice personal stories of WordPress personalities. And you, coincidentally, even though we didn't know you were going to be on the show, you were in our list of things to talk about. Do you want to just run through why you decided to kind of put this piece up and what the backstory is?
It's an interesting, because so my story started well before joining, the WordPress community, and it's the struggles before that. And I was sort of stuck in life with being, doing a job. We owned a restaurant, and making that transformation of something you don't really, you're sort of stuck in that, and you want to change a career. And I've spoken to so many people that struggle to change their career, complete change. How did you do it? And because you have an income, and we had kids. There are lots of outgoings. How do you do that? How do you manage that? So I wanted to share that side of the story. And then, of course, the other side is the tragedy whereby we lost our daughter. So using some of that negative experience, turning that into positive. So I had sort of two sides to the story. And added to that, Topher, who was a key person, and he didn't know that at the time, for me to make that transformation into what I was doing into sort of WordPress and making a living with WordPress. He was one of the trainers on OS, or educators on OS training, and I binge watched his videos in order to get myself into a good enough level, migrating from Joomla knowledge into WordPress knowledge, and to apply for that job. And I think I had sort of a 2-week window where I could binge watch that. Anyway, I told him this story a few years ago at the WordCamp, and yeah, it was a really nice meeting. He didn't realize, of course, so it was a nice occasion. And since then, we've crossed paths a few times, and here we are again. In a way, crossing paths, totally coincidental.
Yeah.
That's how it sort of came about.
Well, it's a really lovely piece, and it speaks to me because this is going to sound really quirky, and I don't know if Ian, Christina, if any of this will mean anything to you. Maybe not. I don't know. But the fact that I've been stuck at home for the last year, I'm really glad that I had a sort of pre-built stuck-at-home community to keep in touch with, because we were all doing Zoom anyway, right? I was. And so I was sitting here doing this, and I'd built this phalanx of people that I wanted to talk to on a regular basis, and they were just there. And so in many ways, during the last year, the WordPress community it's on autopilot still. I've got the same thing that I had 18 months ago that I've got now. A lot of my friends who had jobs where they needed to leave and go to an office, and they've had crises the like of which I haven't had to go through. So I feel really blessed by that. And so, the piece that you wrote, just bigging up the WordPress community, which is, of course, the job of Hero Press. I feel really, really pleased that bit was in my life, and those Lego bricks were already assembled before the crisis that we're all undergoing. So I'll just throw that out there if anybody wants to concur or disagree.
I think the community part is a really big part, and hopefully that came across in what I wrote as well. That how I first met Paul Lacey, in part of the WordPress Birmingham meetup, and how we connected, and suddenly that platform, WordPress or the tool, suddenly have faces and people and connections, and that feeling. I don't know if you've been to sort of a WordCamp, and the day after, the days after, the week after, you're so inspired, and you've met people, you've talked to them, and Hero Press are sort of the stories that you share. It's one or two a bit more intimate because of the after party, or the hallway track where you get to know each other a little bit better, and then you have this sort of this buzz after WordCamp where you feel quite good. You're not quite sure what it is, but you're inspired to carry on and to to maybe follow somebody else's footstep or example. And I think Hero Press is probably fills that space for me, where you have these real connections in a time where you can't make connections or build up a community. But yeah, that community, although I wouldn't go as far as like, oh, if it wasn't for the community, but that definitely played a big part in my story. Well, sorry, Christina and Ian, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I was going to say the community is just such a big thing, and same as you, Nathan. The last sort of year or so, just knowing that we've got this group of people that are all doing the same thing, but part of the WordPress world, it's just made it easier to get through, I think, because you can fall back on chatting to people on Twitter or Slack or having Zoom meetings, and even just having the remote team that you're going to speak to day in, day out anyway, because it's all set up. And like, yeah, on a smaller scale, the podcast that I do, speaking to my co-host every other week or every couple of weeks, is just so good, because I'm not getting to see my friends as normal or family, and it just makes it makes it a bit easier. But also, I think community, and I said it before, if there wasn't the WordPress community and Twitter and people in that space who are just very friendly, I don't think I would be in the position I am doing the job that I do, because it's all made possible by people in the community and having sort of access to things like Twitter and Slack. And that's just mind blowing, because where else does that sort of happen? So yeah, thankful as well, indeed.
Yeah, I think for me, it was also, big into the WP Elevation community. So we're always, there's just constantly talking, constantly having, we have coaching calls every Thursday with the community. So my partner, Pete, and I just have constant conversations all week long and through Zoom. But I have to say, years ago when I started, I had done a Drupal site and the developer disappeared. And it was, I moved into WordPress because I could find people. There were this big community of people that would help me. And it's funny, going just a little bit back to what Lee was saying about people jumping on Facebook and hoping to get free help from everybody. In a way, that's kind of why we all move into WordPress, is because there's so many people willing to help. And I think that's the beauty of WordPress, the community of itself. And then when my very first WordCamp, I was like, oh my God, I found my peeps. This is it. These are my people, and it was just so much fun. And it just, and like you guys were saying, once the pandemic hit, we were already doing this. So I ended up working with my local community, doing pop-up webinars to show them how to do it,
Right.
I wrote a blog post on how to set up your Zoom. It's still now a year later, the #1 post people find me on. But yeah, it's just, we're used to this. Now, my fear though, is I'm getting a little too used to this.
Yes.
I don't know. We're supposed to have WordPress meetups at Houston and everyone's, I'm not sure when to start, because it's been really convenient to find speakers and to have just run upstairs, sit at my desk and start a meetup. Whereas before I've got I got to drive and I got to get the equipment set up and I got to find a speaker that's local. And so I'm a little I don't know if I want to go back or not.
Yeah, you'd have to organize the venue or the food or the dietary requirements.
The camaraderie that builds from it. And it has affected WordCamp. We were supposed to have WordCamp in April of 2020. Of course, that got nixed. We kept postponing it. And now the community is not quite there anymore because we don't see each other in person as much. And so I'm not sure when we can have a WordCamp this year, next year, I don't know. So I'm hoping something happens.
I am, despite the fact that I said I'm really glad that I've been sitting in this chair and it's all worked out. I'm also very, very hopeful that at some point soon I'll be able to get out of this chair and do some of the live stuff. But yeah, honestly, I think it's so easy to forget how unbelievably hard it is if you're not familiar with computers. No, there's no way I'm going on. I don't want to watch somebody on a screen. That's just too weird. But we've all got into it, and those barriers for me just evaporated years ago. So I feel very privileged to be in some sort of technology industry where we can do this. Just a couple of comments to throw in, if that's all right. First of all, Topher, who obviously was very much instrumental in what Ronald was saying. He waves and says hi. And Lee Jackson also makes the comment. He's obviously, we were just talking about him. I don't know if you heard it. I'm guessing you did, Lee. We talked a little bit about you and your podcast post. You can't fault the WP community. Yeah, we have been faulting them. Now we're building them up again. We're building them up. I may be using the product, but I ain't going nowhere socially. Yeah. So that's nice to know. And also Maya, just saying she agrees. I think that was probably related to the stuff I was saying about the community and being able to use Zoom and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, I know time is tight, especially for Ronald, so we'll just very, very quickly move on. I don't know if Christina and Ian, are you all right to just carry on for a couple of minutes if Ronald does have to leave us on the hour? Would that be all right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. In which case, I'll still go at a fair pace, but right. Let's just mention this one again. Hero Press, go and check out Ronald's article. It was published on the 17th of March, 2021.
I've just learned that Maya's story is on there as well. You just shared a comment of Maya.
Oh, so, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that Maya from GoDaddy?
GoDaddy Pro, yes. Yeah. She's the European... whatever it is.
Okay. She'll maybe drop it in. But thank you, Maya, for making that comment. And go and search out Maya's piece as well. Okay. So this is interesting. I'm just always curious. Every single week it seems we can't go a week and without Elementor adding something. And just curious as to where this is going. Elementor have got this piece entitled Introducing Form Submissions, PayPal Button Widgets, and Feature Improvements. We won't really go into the feature improvements. They're always adding little features here and there. But you've now got the option to drop in these little PayPal buttons. And whilst on the face of it, it doesn't seem like a lot, I think it maybe illustrates just one more brick in the wall that has been knocked out by Elementor. Actually, that's the wrong metaphor. We want to build a wall, not destroy a wall. They've added a brick into the wall to make it more of the kind of the complete solution, you know, almost like the SaaS that we all assume is coming down the road that they've alluded to. So they've added in this PayPal button this week, which you can do, but also, you know, just look at this. I mean, this is the form submission section, which they've now added in. And so you go to Elementor, you go to submissions. And to me, that just looks like a gravity form or something. Obviously, in the past, this kind of functionality didn't exist in Elementor. Again, it's just one more brick that they've added. If you needed payment, well, they've now got a very simple PayPal edition, but there it is. You can get paid just by dropping stuff in from Elementor. If you want forms, they've got this fabulous form builder, and now you can look at all the different forms that have been added in by your subscribers over the last year or whatever. It's getting hard to imagine that there's very... move away from whether or not you agree that it offers, you know, a sort of more bloated experience than you might wish for and what have you. They are cranking out updates at a rate. It's very compelling.
It's interesting as well. You're saying that it's a gravity forms, you know, it's this kind of form building competitor, but to me, it just is. It's a Jetpack competitor because it's right. You know, Jetpack has become the one-stop shop for all of the functionality that you would expect in a site. And Jetpack has been adding more and more, and now Elementor's doing it. And this is just, you know, for me, it's actually just really good to see, because why not have that alternate option where if people are designing their sites with Elementor, they can have all of this functionality. And but it is such a, it's an obvious sort of head-to-head thing going on, I think. And as you said, with their sort of cloud offering, I think it's elementor.cloud or elementor.com/cloud, which is going to be their future thing, which is not available right now, but it's coming. And that's WordPress.com basically for Elementor sites. And it's not going to be WordPress as we know it. It will be an Elementor version of WordPress. So yeah, it's just super interesting from the marketplace, because yeah, it just for me makes me laugh, because people have just for years and recently, when Jetpack added forms, just went, oh, I can't believe Jetpack added forms. But then everyone just kind of goes, oh, it's Jetpack, it's automatic. And now Elementor have done the same. And it's like, well, good on you. Of course, if they do it, sure, why can't we do it, kind of thing.
Yeah, Lee in the comments is just sort of saying he predicts. It's an interesting prediction. It's something that has crossed my mind, but I've not yet sort of voiced it. The prediction that maybe it will become a fork of WordPress, which will be successful in its own right. The figures at the minute are 7 million websites. I don't know how many of those are on the free version and how many are not. But I'll go to Ronald, because I know that he's only got wrong way. Point the right way. I know that he's only got a couple of minutes left. So anything to add here, Ronald, before we go, or you go?
Yeah, no, Elementor. I mean, you said the figure 7 million. You know, it's a big group of users, and you could criticize that it's too much, or it's too this, or it's too that. I think they have a very clear vision of where they want to go, and I could see this PayPal and Form Builder just a stepping stone into maybe digital content or paid for content, you know, courses, LMS, that type of stuff. It's quite easy to roll that out. And, you know, that opens up to a whole new group of users who are not really interested in what they're using, as long as they can share the content and get paid for it. And, you know, whether it's WordPress or it's doing their own fork that, you know, like the maybe suggested, maybe it's irrelevant to all the new users that are still onboarding in the next 5 years. You know, they really don't care so much what technology it's built on. But at the same time, I do worry a little bit about where everything is heading, the different directions, because I think WordPress is only as strong because we all have each other, and we are we building on this community, and you have the possibility and the flexibility of using different plugins or page builds, and you can switch. So once everything sort of becomes disintegrated and we have our own sort of proprietary systems, maybe marketplaces, it becomes more and more difficult to switch from one host to another host, because they can play nicely with one solution but the other one can't, and then you turn into far maybe greater compatibility issues than you currently have. So I'm hoping that the industry can sort of stick together. Everybody can do their own thing. It is highly competitive. There's a lot of money to be made, but yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. And what lays ahead for all the different companies. Can't say too much about it. I hear a lot of different stories in my conversations, but it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, Ronald, anytime you want to drop out, there's just click that I'll do leave sort of a studio break, button. But, we'll carry on for a few more minutes. But thank you, Ronald. Much obliged for you making the time for us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Christina, anything from you on that?
No, I think just what you guys were talking about, just the comparison with Jetpack. That's my worry, is that it does become a bit bloated. And again, from a user's perspective, it's their target in my mind is the user, is the end user, and their ability to quickly make websites and sales. For me, for me to have a form in Elementor and a form here and a contact form in that form, it messes with my process, my maintenance process. And so it costs me more time and money if I've got somebody that put on another form. But again, that's just me I'm not the person probably they're targeting for something like that. But I do worry about bloat. Yeah.
I wonder if I sat over the shoulder of a typical Elementor user. Let's say that we somehow managed to scrape the screens of 7 million WordPress websites who are logging in and interacting with WordPress. I wonder how much WordPress they actually get to see. They get the login screen, and then is it that from that moment on, is WordPress just an inconvenience for them to get where they need to be inside of Elementor? They go directly to the page, click the edit link, and they're just WordPress. Don't need that. I just need the Elementor screen. And as soon as they're finished with Elementor, they use WordPress to log out again. They've got so many things happening. So I believe the roadmap is pretty aggressive as well. Yeah.
But again, I think it depends on who that person is. For me, my clients, we show them and we work with the dashboard in a way that they know what to do, right? We'll walk them through it. We'll clean up the menu a bit. I don't really mess with the dashboard. Some people like to have all these custom dashboards. I don't really do that. I just try and make sure they understand where to go, but we limit what they can do. On the flip side, If you've got somebody that just spun up WordPress, added Elementor, that I don't know what that looks like for them. I don't know. You're right. Is it a WordPress experience or is it an Elementor experience? I use Beaver Builder, so I don't know. But, yeah.
I think it's an Elementor experience. I think unless you're doing the whole user management bit, and I can well imagine that if you've got a website with Elementor, any time you see that black bar, it's like, get rid of that. Just give me the Elementor that I want. I don't want to see any of that.
That's true. Very true.
7 million people.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, go on.
I was going to say, for them, WordPress is the tool to get to Elementor. So Elementor is their destination for sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, segue. We've got 2 segues in one episode. This is ridiculous because I just said 7 million, and here we are. This is 7 million websites, because with great notoriety comes great responsibility. And I'm not going to go into the background of this, but it really is just to say that if you have a WordPress website and you've got Elementor on there, Sarah Gooding wrote a piece this week, amongst other places. I could have chosen a bunch of different security websites that mentioned it. There is an XSS, cross-site scripting vulnerability in the plugin, which has been fixed. WordFence did a write-up about it. So you can click on the link just here. So just go and get yourself updated. That would be very important. 7 million websites. They've got to be very mindful of their security posture, I would imagine. Okay. And the very last piece that we've got for you today, And Ronald is still here. Thank you, Ronald.
I'm still here, yeah.
above and beyond.
My kids can barge in any moment. So
okay, that's fine. That's fine. I don't know why I ever linked to Search Engine Journal, because whenever I get to that page, no matter how many times I've dismissed this wretched pop-up prior to getting to the page, it somehow manages to find its way back. Just found this was curious, really peculiar little story. I about 3 or 4 months ago decided I would take a break from Google. I've still got an Android phone, so they basically know everything about where I am, where I live, what I'm doing, and a whole bunch of other stuff, because my house has all the Google Home devices in it, so they can hear everything I say as well. But I decided I would give an alternative search engine a go. I picked DuckDuckGo because really at that time it was the only one that I knew about. I've been more than happy. Literally nothing that I've searched for on DuckDuckGo has given me results that I thought were subpar, so I'm sticking with that. But interesting that a whole raft of ex-Google employees have decided they're going to build a new search engine. And that's, I think, the interesting bit for me. It's ex-Google employees. Now, I don't know what contractual obligations they're under not to pilfer technology, or whether they've been out of Google long enough that they can steal the technology. But they've decided that they're going to build their own privacy-related search engine. And this piece is explaining that basically. But the key message here is, if you want a more private search, unlike DuckDuckGo, which has advertising, these guys are going to request a few dollars out of your back pocket. And I think it was mooted somewhere between the region of, I think it was $5 and $10 a month. They've received a boatload of funding. And obviously, they've got a heck of a heritage themselves. One of them was the VP of engineering at Google. Probably knows a thing or two. And coincidentally, they've set up offices just down the road from the great big Googleplex. And although I'm not trying to start a conversation about this particular search engine, I was just curious to know whether any of you guys have sort of got a bit fed up with some of the incumbent tech companies, the Googles and the Facebooks, and have taken steps to quieten down the noise from them and the impact that they've got in your lives. So if anybody wants to chip in any order, go for it.
I think it's quite normal, isn't it, that you have this sort of wave movement, and big businesses are really powerful. I mean, it's not difficult to understand or to name a few big companies that were very popular 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that now you don't know who they are anymore. So maybe it is the time that things are starting to change. But I do think Google is also very much driven by advertisers, because it's such a big platform with Google Ads is a big thing, but Mail and Maps, and it's so integrated. It's very difficult to step away from that, because you just said it yourself, Nathan, that even though you try to do it just for your searches, but you're still so much connected with everything Google that I don't know if we can ever wean ourselves off Google. If that's even possible. Maybe I don't even want to, because it is sometimes very convenient that things do work and are integrated. With your phone, you can send it to your car and there it is, off you go, drive away. Do I want to reconnect all of those pieces based on, maybe they're sharing some data, not just some, quite a lot of data by a search engine? I don't know if that's going to make the big difference, but I'm open to it. I think it's only good that things are being questioned, because it will also tighten up Google's way of collecting and sharing data.
Ian or Christina?
I think for me, it's we're like you guys are saying, we're so ingrained in it, and it's really hard to separate yourself, especially when you're out there, like you're saying with maps. I've actually on my phone just got logged off from Google Maps. And I swear to God, every time I get into my car, like, hey, you're logged off. You sure? You sure you want to be logged off? I'm like, dude, yes, I don't need, you want me to log in. You want to see where I'm going. I get it. So it's constantly perpetuating. So I do use other maps, but yeah, I think when it comes to privacy, I'm just so ingrained in this world of digital marketing. I'm used to it by now, which is kind of bad, but I have a 19 and a 13-year-old.
Right.
And that's where my brain goes, they don't need to be on this. Everything about them does not need. And so I'm constantly on my daughters about stop sharing. You don't need to be on this stuff. You can get off of it. So I would like an alternative, like a browser like this, where I can just kind of cut that off at the knees. But it's really, really hard to just not use these Google. There's been some studies. I think somebody tried to do that. Actually, it was Amazon. They tried to cut themselves off from Amazon and not use any Amazon at all. It was impossible.
Oh, including AWS.
Everything, because everything.
Oh, give up.
And she couldn't disconnect from Amazon in any capacity. It was so hard.
No, Dropbox, no, nothing. Yeah.
Nothing. And so it permeates more than just our privacy. It's just, you've got these, and it's a whole other topic, but these conglomerates that, maybe it's time to take a deeper look into this. And I think somebody posted on here earlier about, well, I'm okay with ads. I'd rather not pay, and I'll just accept the ads. I mean, I'm on YouTube. I'm okay with the ads. So of course, they keep trying to drill me to buy every time I log on. They want me to get a family subscription, but I'm just not ready to go down that path. Another subscription. And this is just, it's never going to end. We've got subscriptions for TV now. Every show, they want a subscription, any video, any media content, a subscription, anything. So I'm a little on, do I want to pay now for search engines or just accept the ads? It's just this weird, but I would like to see a little bit more. And I think you guys did on Europe is trying to protect that privacy. And what can we do to just get a little bit more protection on our own data? So, yeah.
And Ian, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, with the Google side of things, I'm still very much a Google user, and I kind of just allow it to happen, and Gmail and all of that stuff. But from a Facebook point of view, I've not been on Facebook for years, and I'm kind of more conscious of what that means for sharing, and try to be less sharing on there. But then because you're in this sort of digital, the marketplace that we're in, and Facebook for ads and Google for ads, and the ability for Facebook to be able to target the right customer for you from Facebook ads is too good an opportunity. So I see it from both sides, and like personally, I don't want to be anywhere near it, but from a business point of view, it's great. Yeah. And that's such a terrible sort of like two-way, that's bad, but that's just how it is. And the only thing I was just, sorry. Yeah.
No, you carry on. I shouldn't have interrupted.
No, I was just going to say the other thing that just picking up on what Christine said about the sort of the European and the privacy and the GDPR stuff. I was on a phone call to my car garage today, and they spent 15 minutes going through my marketing preferences on the telephone and what I would like to be contacted via them or their partners. And I was just like, I cannot be dealing with this. You think cookie pop-ups are bad on the web. If you have that on a phone call, it's horrendous. So that's a throwaway comment because it is for the right reasons, but it's a terrible implementation across the board.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating about your garage. That kind of stuff just really, because it's actual time lost in your actual day. You can scroll through a form in seconds. No. But now next question is no.
You have to go to the stores when you actually shop. Do they stop you? Because now in the US, it's like, can we have your phone number? And we need your name and your email and your phone number before you can buy anything. And I'm always like, no, you don't. Can I just check out? Do they do that with you guys? Do they at the clerk say, hey, is it okay if we send you an email? Is it okay if we do that? Do they do that?
No, not really, because the transactional process is very much, you walk up, you put down the thing that you want to buy and you pay with your card and then you just walk off. But the only time they try to get you with that is if you return something. Upon returning things, they often say, oh, can we get your, your telephone number? And for me, it's just a blanket. No. Why would you possibly want that?
Every time you shop, they want your phone number and to create an account with us so we can track your purchases, and you get special rewards, which usually is, $20 here and there, but everywhere you go,
name and what are shops? But what do you do in a shop? I don't know.
In the shop, I mean,
when you go there, you buy stuff and you walk out with them. This is I don't know. Can't remember those things.
Their own little shopping card, their own little card, their loyalty card.
That was kind of the beginnings of it, wasn't it? I feel that like where you are, Christina, they just kind of want to roll up your sleeve and put the chip right in directly.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, but did you see? So this is probably much more widespread in America, but I think in London, for the first time ever, one of these little Amazon shops popped up where, I mean, there must be staff, right? Because they've got to repack the shelves. But the process is that you just walk through, scan something on your phone, walk through this turnstile, and then the shop, just myriad array of cameras above, can figure out what you've taken off a shelf, and then, you know, probably what you've put back on a shelf and so on. And it makes decisions about what you ought to be charged as you walk out. And so there's no actual checkout process. And you just think, boy, at that point, just give up. They just know literally what you're eating. Yes.
I've heard that's what they're going to move toward with Whole Foods. So Whole Foods will have this process where there's no checkout. You just fill it up and you use your own scanner or something as you walk out. There's no checkout process. It's just done as you shop. So it's coming. It's coming. They're going to, that little chip, you know.
Yeah. I just feel that in my own tiny, insignificant way, I just want to fight back a little bit. And I think that the catalyst for me was that movie. What was it called? The social
experiment? The social,
whatever it was. It was a Netflix movie, and they were tracking every moment that I watched it. But what was it called? It was like about a year ago. Anyway, that film, I'm sure somebody can alert us to it. I watched that, and I had a real epiphany halfway through it, and I got for the first time what people have been bashing on about. You are the product. Somehow that message never got into my head. It just didn't connect. And I watched that film and I thought, my God, I'm the product. And then I sort of ran around trying to disconnect myself from as much as possible. And I just can't. But where I can, I will. Although it'll be very slight. But I think you make a good point, Ian, about, the Facebook ad things. I don't want to be targeted by Facebook ads, but if I had a business, I'd want to put Facebook ads out. It's just so beguiling. Yeah. It's brilliant.
Well, with the iOS updates, that's going to make some huge changes on how that's
coming soon.
So, so we'll see what happens with that and their advertising. I'm trying to understand how that's going to affect. I don't use Facebook ads myself. I have to hire that. I have to refer to that. It's so complicated.
Yeah, somebody else gets to get their hands dirty with that.
But speaking of, we do AdWords though, so but at the same time.
I recently started using the Brave browser, which is a Chromium fork, which ostensibly tries to mask a little bit of the tracking that's going on. There's this little picture of what looks like a lion's icon in the top right at the end of the URL bar, and it tells you how many trackers it's blocked. So, for example, like your Facebook, it's like 7,862 in the first 4 seconds. Off it goes, and that's my little way of trying to block all of that nonsense. Anyway, I've used up far too much of everybody's time. Just quickly, in case anybody wants to mention something that they are involved in, doing, publishing, reading, enjoying, whatever, can we just go around quickly? I'll start with Ronald, who's amazingly still here. So we'll go with Ronald. Anything you want to say, Twitter handle, whatever, go for it now.
Oh, no, you need to join the Do the Woo Community Builder meetup or events by Bob WP. I'm just got involved. We did our first event last week of a roundtable discussion. I'm sort of the host. I have a few panelists, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun in the coming months. But he's doing something every week, so that's if you're in the WooCommerce space, it's definitely something to get involved with. And of course, my usual co-host in WooCommerce London. So get involved with that. Other than that, you can find me. Oh yeah, read the Hero Press article, and pretty much everything about me. So
in one small tiny article. Who doesn't love Bob Dunn? Thank you, Ronald. That's awesome. Christina?
Just on our Houston WordPress meetup, I'm always looking for speakers. So so if anyone's interested, just email me, chawkins@globalspecs.com. I need some speakers. I need developer speakers. We need a mix. I need marketing, developers, stuff like that. So if anyone's willing to be a speaker at a Houston WordPress meetup.
Thank you. I hope somebody manages to hear this and gets in touch. And finally,
Chris last week. So
nice. Very nice.
Talking memberships. So it was really good.
Nice. Sorry, finally, Ian.
That's all right. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm PovWeb, and yeah, you mentioned it before. My new newsletter that I started a couple of weeks ago, I had the first email out. It's WP Trends, and if you're interested in hearing my WordPress market insights and information about trends and anything going on in the WordPress sort of business side, like acquisition opportunities, please, feel free to subscribe and get me in your inbox. It's wptrends.co.
Very, very nice. Thank you. I'm going to end on Cameron Jones' comment. It's funny, though, he says, because just today I got a targeted ad on Facebook for coriander because Facebook has determined I'm interested in coriander. They're not as smart as they think they are. And as they say on Top Gear, on that bombshell, we'll end it. So I'm going to say bye-bye. Thanks for joining us this week. Really appreciate it.